Hello everyone and welcome back in. Well, if you've paid any attention at all over the last little bit of time here, there's a Facades Group Build going on, especially if you've been looking at Facebook. This is through AK Interactive and hosted by the Plastic Posse podcast. It's a Facades Group Build, primarily concentrated around the facades offered by AK Interactive, the Charvins Facade, which I'm showing here, and there's also an old English bookstore. But that's not limited, the facade build, to whatever you want to do. If you want to scratch build your own facade, which I will be doing in part 2 of this series, then that's also up for interpretation, and just go for it. They're basically an all-in-one type of inclusive kit. You have the facade face, you have a selection of Generation 3 paints to use, you have a couple of paint brushes, and you have this little handy-dandy step-by-step manual about 12 pages long showing how the box art example was created. Very nice graphics all in all. As I sat down to consider what I would be doing for my own facade, I knew from the beginning, from the start, that I wanted to try to do something that was outside of my usual style. So I ran the facade through Photoshop just to kind of paint out some different ideas digitally, so to speak, just using some different filters. I ended up working on something like this. This is the one that kind of caught my eye. It was still very expressive, still artistic in nature, and had a very, I like the looseness of it all and the brightness. And so this is the one, this is the kind of my template that I'm going for. And then, as I've done before, just easy way to select your color palettes, which paints to use. I just use the little eyedropper sampler and just kind of pop it along a couple different places here. And I'll just match those little color dots to my paints that I'll be using, or try to find the paints and get something similar, and kind of a nice head start, so to speak. So here we are. There's my examples, just a couple of different lighting examples of the same piece. My colors sitting there on the side. So now let's get to painting. And here we are with my facade all ready to go. I've given it a light coating, a light spray of Mr. Surfacer 1200. And now I'm going to lay out my colors. Again, the box comes with a selection of colors, basically to replicate what is on the box art. But of course, I've changed my colors. So this is my selection of Generation 3 acrylics. Within the box, as I mentioned, there are 2 paint brushes, a number 8 flat brush and a number 6 round brush. And I am going to limit myself to using those 2 brushes and those 2 brushes only. And I'm doing that for one main reason here, because like I said, I want to try a different painting style, not to be very exact in my style here, to try to be more expressive, more loose with my touch here, try to, I don't know, be more creative, for lack of a better term. And I think using the bigger brushes will remind me, if not force me, to kind of continue down that path throughout my painting here. So with that in mind, as you can see, the brush strokes are broad and the colors are kind of chaotic at this point. I'm basically just blocking in colors. Like I said, this is brand new, so this is kind of uncharted territory, but I'm liking how this is starting out even before my very eyes here. I can, if you squint your eyes, you can kind of see where it's going. And believe me, I did a lot of squinting throughout the painting process, because at times it would get in close and other times I would lose it, and I'd have to kind of bring it back, and oh my goodness, but it was a lot of fun. And that's really what I enjoyed about these facades, is that you are able to get to the fun part straight away. There's no construction. Well, I back it up. It's really up to you if you want to do construction. Let's put it that way. They're great just out of the box if you wanted to add certain elements, say some awnings or a sidewalk or extra door handles or something like that. It's up to you. Just do what you want. It's your facade. Let your imagination run wild. A special thank you to all my amazing Patreon members for your incredible support. Your contributions help me continue to create content for this channel. If you're not already a member, I invite you to join our Patreon community. As a member, you'll gain access to exclusive behind-the-scenes content, early releases, and more. I hope you'll consider joining Patreon and supporting this channel. Thank you very much. Well, the painting process is going along here, and I'm certainly enjoying myself. And I can't help but thinking, what would Bob Ross do? Or more specifically, what would Bob Ross talk about here? Because, he's great for doing his painting and telling stories along the way to keep the audience involved. And I'm not really sure that I'm that good of a storyteller here. I don't have a happy bunny sitting over there underneath that bush, and my trees are, I don't even have any happy trees, and my shadows on my mountains aren't that bold. So I'm not really sure what to talk about here. So I'm going to let the video roll for a while here. Just keep in mind, 2 large brushes, the number 8 flat, the number 6 round, big bold strokes. That's what I'm looking for. Kind of blocking in colors, and then do a little bit of refining on the back side, always using those larger brushes. I'll jump back in here in just a little while. see, I think this is probably a pretty good place to jump back in. Well, if you remember towards the beginning of the video, I talked about, putting in those bold colors and kind of squinting my eyes to try to get the picture of what was really coming together there, because at that point it was just blocks of color. By this stage, the blocks of color have started to take on a life of their own. The definition, the light and the shadows are there. I've done some outlining around some of the boards and the window frames, kind of give it that characteristic, kind of dramatic, illustrative type of a feel, which I was going for as well. So now I don't have to squint my eyes quite as much, and I think it's starting to come together. Just a few extra details here. We start making things pop just around some of these edges. Just add a little bit of brightness to some of these hinges and door handles, just to bring those out and add a little sparkle here, just something to catch your eye. And we're getting pretty close. There are a few places that my skill level kind of lets me down here and there, that if I look at my inspiration photographs, for instance, I go like, oh, I could keep working here and I could keep working there, or I should try this or try that. But as I also mentioned at the beginning of this, there was a lot of times when I would, it would come together and then it would fall apart, and I'd kind of bring it back together and it would fall apart again. And that's just the nature of painting. I understand that. That happens on my models. That happens here on this facade as well. But I get to a point here now where I'm thinking, I'm getting close to being done, and maybe I'm chickening out here, and maybe I'm not reaching the full potential. But whatever the case may be, we're going to start wrapping this one up here, because I think I'm close enough to be able to start calling it good. But before I do that, before we call it good, as I mentioned earlier on, this was a group build. It's an ongoing group build right now, and some other folks around the world have been putting together their Charvins facade. I want to highlight some of those right now. And now, returning to my own facade, this is kind of a quick time-lapse photo sequence of the evolution of my paint work throughout this, clearly showing the different, blocking in those various colors, and then finally towards the end, adding those deeper shadows and adding to some of those details. Once finished, added a small frame so I can hang this on my wall. And then finally, just one last view, not a lot of beauty shots to a flat piece of the Charvins facade. As I mentioned, the facade group build is ongoing, and you're not limited to the AK facades. You can create your own. Episode 2, the follow-up to this episode, will be the creation of my second facade, which will be a very different type of a theme here. I hope you'll stay tuned for that. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like and subscribe. And until the next time, everyone, happy modeling.